This video is going to be all about modifying the suspension on the Jeep Wrangler 392. I'm going to go over some options that I went with, some things to consider, and a few tips if you're going to be installing the lift kit at home. Alright, let's get to it. Now the first thing to note is that all 392s come with a 2-inch suspension lift from the factory. This is enough to run a 35-inch tall tire when using a 1-inch rear bump stop out back, and if you want to run a 37, all you'll need to do is put a 2-inch rear bump stop out back. That's it. So if you're just looking to run a taller or true to size 35 or 37-inch tall tire, you can do so for relatively low cost. If you are like me and you actually like to spend some time on the trail, you will quickly find the limitations of that stock 2-inch kit, primarily due to the suspension travel. What you will find is two things really. Up front, it is very limited. I think you have about 5.5, maybe 6 inches of total travel before you start lifting off a tire, and that's really not a lot. Also, with the weight of this heavy V8, it just doesn't feel like the factory got the valving right. I can blow through the suspension travel pretty easily off-road, which is a little disappointing given that it is a high horsepower vehicle and you're probably going to want to go fast from time to time. While there are a tremendous amount of quality suspension options for the JL platform, I went back with a company that I've been using for years and just simply had great luck with, and that's JKS Manufacturing. Now, I opted for one of their 2.5 series lifts. The idea here is being a minimal amount of lift over what the vehicle had from the factory, because I didn't really need a lot of lift, but when optioned with the Fox 2.5 series shocks with DSC adjusters, I'm able to get more suspension travel. Now, the DSC part is very important, especially if you're a 392 owner. What DSC is dual speed compression, and it gives you the ability to dial in both your low speed and high speed compression settings. Low speed compression has to do with the speed of the shock shaft, nothing to do with the speed of the vehicle. And the best way that you can figure out how to make it where you can feel these adjustments is when you're driving down the road, and let's say you've just loaded up your whole family, you've got your cooler in the back, and you're heading out to your local trail. You might notice that the vehicle wants to wander a little bit. It feels like it's kind of soft and loamy now that you got this extra weight in it. And a good way to adjust for that is to give it more low speed compression. That's a low speed movement of the shock, letting the vehicle sort of sway a bit. Giving it 1 or 2 clicks is going to tighten that up. Now, high speed compression, again, doesn't have anything to do with the speed of the vehicle, but rather the speed of the shock shaft. And this is going to be more associated with, let's say, impact events. So whether that's hitting a giant speed hump that you didn't see really fast, or a pothole, or going off-road and hitting that big rock obstacle at speed. And in order to control that, you're going to be dialing up the compression setting for that particular high-speed event. Why that's important for the 392 is that you have a lot of sprung weight with this big V8 engine, and anytime you get into a big high-speed event like that, that weight becomes a huge factor. Adding larger tires and different wheels will definitely factor into that as well. So for me, I really like the ability to say, you know what, I'm going to go off-road. I've got the whole family with me today. I want to go ahead and dial up my high-speed compression so I can drive a little bit more aggressively. And then when I'm done with the trail, I can dial it all back and get it back to a more balanced state of suspension. I'm not just stuck with one particular setting. So big fan of that. If you're looking at a suspension, regardless of what company, a lot of the company's coil springs are going to be pretty close, but shock valving and shock adjustability is going to be huge. My experience with the Fox 3.0 and 2.5 shocks is that they are not snake oil, and the ability to actually dial in that compression is something that I actively do, and it really makes a big difference. So let's get into actually installing this kit on the vehicle and how much lift it actually gave me. I want to start by saying that this is in no way meant to be a step-by-step installation video. JKS provides very good instructions that will walk you through the entire process if you choose to do the install at home. One thing that I have learned to do over the years with the JL suspension is reroute the parking brake cables under the cross member. From the factory they run over and they can limit your suspension travel, so all you'll need to do is disconnect them at the axle side using a set of vice grips, and then you can run them under and that's it. You're good to go and you won't have to worry about them hanging up on the trail or any future issues. It's worth mentioning that JKS does offer a few different lines of this particular 2.5 suspension kit. This is the J Connect line, which includes fixed length 2-inch diameter quarter wall control arms. Now, the rear arms are about a 1/4 inch longer than the original ones, which help push the rear axle back slightly and rotate the axle housing. The arms come with Cleveite rubber bushings that are very similar to what came on the stock control arms. The advantage of these is they don't require any maintenance and they work very well at absorbing vibration. For a daily driven Jeep, I highly recommend these. Since I was already using a 2-inch JKS rear bump stop, I didn't have to do anything, so I just left that in place. Attaching the rear shocks is a little bit easier than the ones up front, as the fluid reservoir is already attached to the body. To ensure that the tracking would be as close to perfect as I could get it, I went ahead and opted for the adjustable rear track bar from JKS. Up front, much of the process is the same in regards to removing the original coils, shocks, and sway bar links. The main difference here is that the Fox 2.5 Performance Elite shocks mount the fluid reservoir behind the factory front bumper. It's also worth noting that I left out the front bump stop axle spacers since the factory bump tower is lower on the 392. I already knew that I had enough clearance previous to this lift to properly cycle my 37-inch tall trail grapplers. Once we measured out for tracking, we installed our adjustable track bar and got our steering wheel straight. The fixed lower control arms gave us 6.4 degrees of caster, which was an improvement over the 4.3 degrees the Jeep came with originally. I'll talk more about the on-road handling and benefits of this in the next video. One thing that's worth mentioning that we learned a little bit the hard way is that the 2.5 Performance Elite Fox shocks provide a serious increase in down travel. So much so that our factory front driveline contacted the crossmember and chewed up the boot. We actually had a spare drive shaft from our Jeep Gladiator build, so we decided to swap on the used driveline and just pull the crossmember off for now. If we do end up going with an aftermarket front drive shaft, we can simply reinstall the crossmember later. In terms of actual lift height, we found that the Jeep up front was raised by 1.75 inches and in the back by 1.5 inches. Keeping in mind that we do have a 10,000-pound Warn winch up front, which impacts the overall lift height slightly. We like that the Jeep no longer has a rear high rake and find that it sits fairly level. As you may have noticed in some of the video, I've put 2 different wheel sets on this vehicle so far. The main one I've been running almost since day one is an AEV Pentler wheel that has 5.77 inches of back spacing. What I quickly found is that is too much back spacing for the suspension kit. It not only allows the tire to hit the shock in the back, but it was hitting the fluid reservoir in the front along with rubbing the lower control arm. The Extreme Recon wheels that came with the Jeep actually only have 5.2 inches of back spacing. Versus swapping out my tires, I actually went and pulled the tires and wheels off of my dad's 392 Wrangler, which is running a 37 by 1250 R17 Nitto Recon Grappler on the factory Extreme Recon wheels. Both the Recon Grappler and the Trail Grappler are true to size 37 by 1250s, so this was really going to give me a good apples to apples comparison. So if I decided to go back to the XR wheel, I could give a good idea of what was going to rub. what I quickly found is that while it does give you a little bit more clearance at the shock in the back and at the front lower control arm, it's still hitting the reservoir hose. JKS recommends a wheel with a maximum of 5 inches of back spacing for a 37-inch tall tire. So I'm going to need to do something else with the wheels. I do not want to run wheel spacers because that's going to really disrupt the scrub radius. I'm definitely a big fan of high numerical back spacing when I can get away with it, as it's something that really helps with steering and keeps the front end feeling lighter, which is very important on something that has so much front end weight like this 392. It's also worth mentioning that I had to modify another common rub point on the JL, which is located at the back side of the passenger fender. So we'll see if this is going to be enough. This is all part of the bumper stuff down here. I might end up doing an aftermarket bumper. I can always pull this. It's not really that big of a deal, but it's actually not really grabbing much here. This was the problem area. So hopefully this is enough. Well, hopefully you guys found this helpful and informative. If you do have any questions, please drop them in the comments section below. My next video is going to be focusing on and off-road performance. I'm going to go into settings, some of the things that I found that I like and I don't like about this setup. We're going to go back into tires and wheels and what I'm ultimately probably going to go with, and some future upgrades for the 392. If you want to see some behind the scenes progress, you can check me out on Instagram at Ali Mansour Editor. And until next time, I hope to see you guys on the trail. Take care. Bye. Thanks for sticking around to the end. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please consider subscribing to the Driving Line channel. Our goal is to excite, entertain, and educate you on all things automotive. So if you want to come be part of our journey, please hit that subscribe button, and we hope to see you on the next video. Take care.